The breathtaking FX series Snowfall's central tragedy is a tragedy that is uniquely American. Despite all the ways in which it has been claimed that this is a land of freedom, the narrative here has been steadily demonstrating how it is also a land of exploitation. The late great John Singleton, who died in 2019, created Snowfall, where he and his collaborators showed great care to an ensemble cast of complex characters as we watched their world fall apart. All of these characters weren't exactly real people, but thematically, their fight for survival in the midst of the crack cocaine epidemic's devastation in 1980s, Los Angeles is played out like an unofficial history that rings painfully true. Here is everything you need to know about what happened in Snowfall Season 6 Episode 1 and 2. Major spoilers ahead if you have not watched the first 2 episodes yet. The first episode of Snowfall Season 6 picks up the day after the events of Season 5's final episode. A young girl is asked by her grandfather why she appears so dejected as she sits on the front steps of her house. She claims that her father never returned. The elderly man rushes his granddaughter to Louis' nightclub, which is guarded by caution tape and patrolling police officers investigating Franklin's murderous crime scene. The young girl recognizes her father's body as one of the bodies at the scene thanks to a bracelet on the body. Louis accuses their nephew of robbing them while speaking with her husband Jerome, which Jerome doesn't deny. But before using force, Jerome contacts Franklin for a simple conversation. Franklin is currently with Veronique in his new hideout, and she is not happy with him for going after his family. He loses his cool when she urges him to make amends with his aunt and uncle. The young saint then requests that Veronique get in touch with her mother's ex-boyfriend in order to assist him in transferring the stolen drug money into a Miami bank. The expectant mother rejects her boyfriend because she finds the request annoying. Franklin next talks with a former Black Panther he knew from his father's network in order to confirm where Teddy's father, his ex-wife, and son are. Meanwhile, Teddy is searching for Parissa. He contacts an old friend of Avi's who is of no assistance. In reality, he finds joy in Teddy's suffering. Even though Teddy is extremely concerned about finding Parissa, he still conducts business. Louis meets Teddy and requests more product because there are no more drugs to sell and numerous distributors are arriving in town to purchase a supply of cocaine. Teddy won't give Louis anything until she tells him that Franklin robbed her after realizing his $73 million had been taken. Teddy appears troubled by the news, but he keeps his thoughts to himself. Teddy leaves, and he goes to his storage to meet with Stephen Habemeyer, his CIA boss. Teddy claims he needs his badge back and full reacceptance into the government organization. Something tells us the corrupt government asset may never experience that happy moment. Later, after searching throughout the entire episode, Teddy miraculously finds his lover Parissa imprisoned in the jail. Even though he was detained by the DEA in the previous episode, Gustavo returns home after resurfacing and acts as though nothing is wrong. Sayamura, who is curious about his whereabouts, is persuaded to accompany the family to the skating rink by him. There he tells Sayamura that Teddy did not intentionally introduce a bug into their home, taking care to withhold the identity of the culprit. It was the DEA, of course. Teddy later inquires as to Gustavo's whereabouts the previous evening. The henchman invents a tale about visiting the hospital's emergency department with one of the kids. Gustavo obviously finds lying to Teddy uncomfortable, because his next action is to rush to the DEA. Gustavo is warned by DEA agent Tony Marino, Scott Subiano, about the risks of simply turning up as a DEA informant, and he is essentially told to calm down before he blows this undercover operation. Michael Hyatt's Sissy Saint is salivating to kill Teddy. She meets with KGB agent Ruben Alejandro Etta, who tells her that Franklin must be contacted in order for their plan to move forward. She agrees wholeheartedly, but she needs to persuade her son that committing potential treason is a good plan. She does that after delivering an emotional speech about the agony of losing Atlan, Kevin Carroll, and being imprisoned in Cuba. Franklin visits the projects with Black Diamond, Christine Horn, and Dallas, Taylor Polidor, in town to conduct business with Dion, Quincy Chad, who has taken over for Leon Isaiah John, who resigned and traveled to Africa. Franklin tells Dion that despite having agreed to purchase cocaine from Jerome and Louis for $12,000 per kilogram, he is ready to sell to him for $10,000 per kilogram. Although the offer is alluring, Dion prefers to speak with Jerome first. When Jerome speaks with Dion, he realizes that Dion wants to work with him. But the truth is that Franklin is charging less for the narcotics. That conversation ends with Jerome leaving with a sly grin on his face. Later, Dion buys the cocaine from Black Diamond in Dallas. The police then stop the two women as they are driving down the street. Disgraced ex-cop Bo Buckley also emerges and steals the money from the women's car trunk as the officers exit the police car. Black Diamond and Dallas are protesting, but they are powerless to do much because actual officers are pointing guns at them. After getting the money, Jerome exits the police vehicle and begins questioning Franklin's staff about where the remainder of his cash and drugs are. They claim not to know. Jerome strikes Black Diamond in the face because he doesn't think they're real. He keeps pressing them, but they don't respond because they honestly don't know. Black Diamond is brutally assaulted by him repeatedly until she passes out. With his last strike, Jerome warns Dallas to send Franklin a message. He will pursue him until he returns all of his belongings. Even for Jerome, who was prone to having a fiery temper, this was a rather sinister move. We learn how Parissa escaped Reuben in the Season 5 final episode at the beginning of the second episode. She reportedly outruns him and scales a barrier. She hurts herself while falling. She is stopped by the cops the next morning. After examining her wounds and noticing that she is somewhat confused, they transport her to jail. Teddy arrives there to save her. Teddy asks Parissa if she received a good look at the man chasing her while she is recovering at home. In fact, she did, and she was able to collaborate with a sketch artist to create a composite picture of Reuben's face. When Franklin and Sissy reach the museum his mother used to take him to as a child, Reuben is waiting for them there. Sissy departs the two men to talk after requesting a private conversation with Franklin. Franklin lets it be known that he is no longer in contact with Teddy, and that the CIA contractor is now interacting with Louis and Jerome as they move through the museum. Reuben is still curious, even though this knowledge is not what he had hoped to hear. Franklin must decide whether to continue working with Kane, Devon Nixon, to exact vengeance on Louis and Jerome after already deciding to collaborate with the KGB to eliminate Teddy. Now that he is awake in the hospital, Kane is determined to avenge the people who tried to murder him. He informs Franklin that he desires as much information as he can get about his aunt, uncle, and former police officer Bo Buckley. Franklin hesitates, and Kane notices. He issues a not-so-subtle threat. Either you help me or I'm your enemy. Franklin hesitates, which makes sense given how much he adores his relative. Franklin must also choose whether to collaborate with Veronique's mother, Tamara Taylor. Veronique arranges for her boyfriend and her mother to meet. Franklin is told by Veronique's mother that she can locate his millions in exchange for a cut of the proceeds. She says that in order to move the money, whoever stole his money had to have a look-alike pretend to be Benjamin Franklin when dealing with the banks. She makes a commitment to search for this double in Panama. She wants 10% of the $73 million if she succeeds, and she also wants him to help her build a connection with her daughter and grandchild. Franklin grants her permission to proceed. After being robbed by their nephew, Louis, Angela Lewis, and Jerome, and Joseph, are still attempting to resume their company. The newlyweds must reassure two out-of-town dealers that they will have product to offer them when they meet with them. Louis and Jerome pledge the dealers they'll have the drugs before they have to leave town even though they don't yet have any, which they'd made if Teddy is a man of his word. After that, Scully, DeAndre Bonds, speaks with Louis and Jerome. As word it has it that they attempted to kill Kane, a more composed Scully instructs Louis and Jerome to make amends with him. Louis goes through the list of those who were aware of the hit and concludes, accurately, that Franklin was the one who informed Kane. Scully stresses that Louis and Jerome make up with Franklin, as well as Kane before karma ruins their lives. Then Scully hands the two a paper crane and promises to be there for them in spirit. The camera zooms in on Louis lowering the crane as she and Jerome depart, which feels very foreboding for what's to come in her future. Teddy joins up with Oso and hopes that he recognizes Reuben from the sketch he has shown him. Oso doesn't immediately recognize him. Later on, however, Oso spots Reuben without the mustache in a photo of Louis and Jerome's wedding that he has on his refrigerator. He first visits Franklin before telling Teddy this news. Franklin and Oso find themselves conversing at a wrestling contest as a nod to how they first met. Oso apologizes for Teddy's treatment of Franklin and for being unable to assist him before bringing up Reuben. Oso asks who the man in the wedding photo is despite Franklin not being particularly amenable to the apology. In order to get Oso to assist Franklin find Teddy, plus, Franklin offers $10 million, the young saint is holding back information about Reuben's identity. Oso is hesitant but promises to assist once Franklin reveals the person's name. Teddy is Franklin's top priority. Former athlete appears willing to support Franklin. Franklin has been urged by Sissy to put things right with his aunt and uncle. She even joins Jerome at a dining table to discuss how they can mend the family. After hearing what his sister had to say, Franklin and Jerome decide to meet and speak. When they settle down, Jerome makes a moving speech about how he took on the role of Franklin's father when his own father struggled with addiction, and how raising Franklin may have been the best experience of his life. He then asks how Franklin came to be the man who is standing in front of him, though right after that, Franklin claims that Jerome was just a pot dealer, but Franklin actually wanted to lead Jerome with money and a reputation. As Franklin says, his uncle was played by the trick he married, things take a turn for the worse. When Jerome's cousin disparages his wife, he strikes the nephew in the face. Franklin continues to insult him, and Jerome slaps him in the face once more until Franklin gets up and points a pistol at him. Despite Jerome's requests, Franklin refuses to fire the gun. Instead, he turns and leaves.